Joining me now is Howard Fineman, MSNBC political analyst and editorial director of the Huffington Post Media Group, and Corey Dade, contributing editor at The Root. Thanks for being here, guys. Corey, let's start with you. What do you think Paul Ryan will or should take away from this meeting?
You know, the Black Caucus and the members aren't anything new to Paul Ryan. I mean, he works with them every day in one way or another. I think that what he'll take away from this is that, you know, the left, and particularly Democrats and the Black Caucus members, aren't going to move off of this. This is really sort of a political meeting for both sides. For the Black Caucus, they get to hold Ryan accountable for his remarks from the radio show. But on the other side, you know, this is part of Paul Ryan's effort to soften his image and conservatives' image coming into an election year. You know, he's been on this tour through the hood over the last several weeks, but he's yet to come up with any policy alternatives that address the issue of America's poor.
I mean, you know, the earned tax credit and certain elements of his budget certainly would suggest there's some substance to his commitment to poverty. What do you think of that?
I think the earned income tax credit is a start, but it is almost negated by so many other things in his budget plan. And he's been very clear in saying his budget plan wasn't meant to include new ideas on addressing America's poor, which to me kind of speaks to the fact that it was really a political manifesto in election year more than anything else.
Right. I mean, he wasn't passed clearly. Howard, listen to what BuzzFeed's McKay Coppins writes. He said, quote, "Ryan is fighting a well-drawn caricature of himself as a wolf in bros clothing, a right-wing radical who disguises his agenda to dismantle the social safety net with an earnest homecoming king of Congress act." A fair caricature?
Well, I think what you have to do is look at the Ryan budget. And the Ryan budget contemplates huge cuts in programs that people need, who need a job, who need help. The poorest of our society, whether they're in the inner cities or in rural Appalachia or whatever. You're talking about big cuts in government programs like Medicare and Medicaid, social welfare programs, education programs, you name it. And that speaks louder. The numbers there, reliable or not, speak louder than whatever he's saying behind closed doors to the Congressional Black Caucus. And my understanding from talking to some of those members is that was a point that they made to him today.
Corey mentioned some of Paul Ryan's bigger political ambitions. We'll see whether there's a 2016 run in the works. And actually, we have some interesting new numbers in our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll about other contenders and the landscape going into that race. One interesting thing that we pulled out of that, 7 in 10 Americans say there should be more candidates for president than simply a Clinton or a Bush. Corey, do you think Americans are over political dynasties?
When they stop voting for the members of those political dynasties, you know, then they'll really be over it. I think, you know, Americans always want expanded choice, but the truth of the matter is this is America runs on a two-party system, and we've seen time and again that candidates who aren't anointed by those two parties don't get very far, especially in a general election fight.
It's certainly something I personally, as a voter, lament that there's not more space outside of that rigid two-party system. Howard, that two-party system, and within those dynasties, the numbers we're looking at right now to this latest poll are 48% viewing Clinton positively and 32% viewing her negatively. And then on the other hand, 21% viewing Jeb Bush positively and even more, 32% viewing him negatively. What do you think of this question of whether 2016 is going to be a dynastic drag race, if you will?
Oh, I think it's way too early to say that. And I think that somebody's going to run against Hillary, maybe several people. There's very little downside risk to doing it. Right now on the Democratic side, she's a prohibitive favorite. So if you run and make a statement, you don't spend or lose all your political capital because you don't have very much to begin with. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the media. So I think there'll be a run against Hillary Clinton. Elizabeth Warren says she's not going to do it. I just saw her the other night. She said again she's not going to do it. But let's see who does. And the Republican side is absolutely wide open, and Jeb has a considerable number of personal and even career issues that he was going to want to deal with before he definitely gets in the race. I'm not convinced that's going to happen.
One of the other striking takeaways from this poll, Corey, is that 47% of Americans believe that the U.S. needs to be less active around the world. What do you make of that, and do you see that affecting how candidates run in this next election cycle?
You know, I think this, Ronan, is just a continuation of the fatigue from Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, you know, the United States, for starters, Americans in general, have always been less interested in foreign policy than domestic policy. And right now, with the economy being what it is, with sort of the continued negative polling, negative sentiments among Americans toward the Affordable Care Act, you know, quite frankly, Americans are over foreign policy for now, whether that's, you know, realistic or mature of them or not. That is the case. I think that Obama always has to thread a needle here. You know, he is expected to project strength. You hear the criticisms with his policy with Russia, but at the same time, you know, his, diplomacy first is actually something that suits the needs of Americans right now, but it's still not resonating with them.
All right, Howard Fineman and Corey Dade, thank you, gentlemen. And straight ahead.
Thank you, Ronan.